Okay, welcome back and welcome to the next video in the F87 M2 OG M2 build series that I am working on. This is my new weekend, maybe a little bit of track, definitely back road kind of fun car. I've already put out a couple videos on it, so you guys can go check those out. Got a great price on this thing a few months ago. Already did a few exterior mods, and now we are going to jump in and start going down the rabbit hole of modifying the engine and powertrain. So our car already has charge pipes, both hot side and cold side, which I think the previous owner installed more for reliability than performance. At least I hope so. Car doesn't really seem like it was modified, but who knows? Previous owner could have returned it to stock when I bought it. Not really sure, but regardless, this is really the first performance mod that I am doing myself. We have a CTS Turbo air intake system. I have a CTS intake on my Audi SQ5 that I like very much. I've also had a CTS system on one of my Volkswagens, which I also liked. They make a good product and at a pretty reasonable cost. One of the advantages to this that I've done some limited reading about is that CTS designed the mass airflow sensor housing to mimic kind of the OEM flow and the OEM shape, which should help prevent any check engine lights. And that is kind of a common issue, at least on these M2s. I think probably on a lot of the N55 powered BMWs, is that putting certain intakes on can trigger a check engine light. But again, this one should be good. Should be no check engine light with this. I'm assuming install will be pretty straightforward. But for anyone that is curious, this will be a how-to / kind of a review of the intake system, and I'll do some before and after clips so you guys can hear the sound. I'm super pumped. This thing already sounds sick, so I think the intake is going to make it sound a whole lot better. But that is it. We'll get this thing unboxed, and then I will jump into the process of how to get it installed. Okay, real quick before we start, I will show the individual parts. So we got a nice wrinkle, powder-coated intake pipe. This is the inlet side of the turbo. This should be the MF side. We have the housing that I talked a little bit about in the beginning. This is the mass airflow housing, which apparently has a shape that doesn't cause a check engine light. Looks good. I may paint it black. I actually wanted to do it before installing the intake, but I'm itching to get it installed, so may do that later. Just paint it like a flat black because I feel like the color just doesn't go great. But anyway, that's besides the point. It should function fine. Filter, I believe this is a dry filter. CTS filters generally look pretty good quality. Then we got couplers and all of the small parts, clamps, etc. in this bag. And then we have heat shields over here, two separate pieces. Not quite sure how they go together yet, but we will figure that out. Nice little CTS logo on that, and also the nice wrinkle black powder coat. All in all, looks high quality, looks good. So happy with the initial thoughts, and we'll jump into the install. All right, not sure if there's a correct order of operations here, but from what I can tell, you got a clamp down here. This is a turbo inlet pipe. So in order to get this off, I have to undo this clamp. This looks like just a grommet that pops off. This is some hose, maybe PCV hose that connects, so that'll pop right off. Looks like two Torx bits for the mass airflow sensor. Don't think there's anything underneath, and then the air box, which likely once I get the lid off will probably just pop right up. So I'm gonna get started. I think I'm gonna start, just loosen this clamp and kind of work my way over this way. Okay, the first step here after staring at this for a little bit and trying to figure it out is actually assembling the heat shield. You can put in the intake pipe first, but that'll take 2 seconds, so I actually moved to assembling the heat shield first. To do this, you basically want it to look like this when it's complete. So you have two pieces, and you want the rounded piece to fit in just like that. There's 3 bolts. You kind of have to flex the heat shield a little bit to get those bolts all in. Once they are in, it snugs up pretty nice. Those are just Allen bolts with a nylon locking nut on the back, so I just use an Allen key and an adjustable wrench to tighten those up. And then here you have this little, I don't know what that is, grommet. You basically just attach that with one of the supplied, I think it's a 10mm bolts. So basically attach this piece, and then you can put the heat shield in. I'm about to do that right now. To put the heat shield in, you also need to remove, there's a plastic cover right here with a T20 Torx bit that's held on just like so. So you need to remove that to get access to this 8mm nut. This is what holds the heat shield in. It'll all make sense in a second. I'm about to bolt this thing in, and then I will explain how I did it. Okay, heat shield's in. As explained, you anchor it down with that same 8mm screw that goes under this cap. I'm about to put that cap back on. Grommet sits down in there. And then there's an odd-shaped hole like this. I don't know if maybe on the M2s it's different than the other N55 cars because it's not a perfect circle. That's what they want you to use to bolt this last bolt into here. I ended up getting another washer. They give you a nut, but they don't give you a washer. So I ended up getting a bigger washer, and it's kind of hard to see. You can see it sandwiched in there. So I put a washer in there because that's a pretty big hole. So yeah, I used their bolt and nut, threw a bigger washer back there, and I still have to tighten this down, but I'll do that in 1 second. Just a note, I was trying to get this thing in here kind of like wedged into the airbox there, but I wasn't able to do that, so it's really just sitting on the outside of the airbox, but it's snug. It's definitely not going anywhere. I'm going to tighten this up. I'm going to put that cap back on so I don't forget to do that, and then we will move forward in the process. Well, I guess you can't run this with the CTS intake installed, which is a little bit frustrating. I have to figure out what I want to do there. I may end up modifying this, just like slotting it or something so that I can still run it. Let's keep going with the process and see if that's the only issue. If that's the only issue, I think I can live with it. Next steps. I put the intake pipe on after I was done getting the heat shield bolted in. Just a note, I could not get the intake pipe, the grommet, over without taking the grommet off. So it's much easier. I found you pull the whole rubber grommet off, it'll pull up really easily. You pop the grommet onto the intake, then you put the whole thing with the grommet included onto the car. So once the intake pipe is done, that takes not much time at all. Then you have to move to getting the MAF housing in. I had to play with this a few times. I didn't find any great videos, so hopefully this helps some other people. But you want the PCV hose side to the left, closest to the front of the car. I initially had it here and realized I had to flip it around, so you need that closest to the front of the car. This coupling goes on. Tried to make these clamps nice and even and get my CTS Turbo logo up. So you basically just get this piece all on here. I have to pop that PCV hose in, put the MAF in, so that's all very easy. Only other thing to note, just grabbed a light. So there's this little holder piece down here that you actually bolt on. There's one single bolt there, and that kind of holds the MAF sort of up from making contact with the heat shield. So that just goes on with one 10mm bolt, and then the filter will go on and the intake install will essentially be done. Again, the grommet will cause issues. Pull the grommet off to put that on the pipe, and when you do the MAF housing, make sure that you have that facing towards the front of the car. Those are my tips. So I'm going to get the filter put on and get everything kind of fully buttoned up. I just have to figure out that plastic housing after I finished tightening everything up. Alright, for anyone curious and wants to do the same thing as me and get that plastic cover to fit, you have to cut it. I don't think there's any way to go around it. Maybe I installed the intake wrong, I don't know, but I don't see how you can get away from not cutting that. Most people probably just won't run it. It's really just a plastic cover that's covering up some wiring looms. I like to keep my car as OEM as I can, and for heat management purposes, whatever else, I wanted to try to keep it. So for anyone who wants to cut it, right on this bend, I basically made a straight cut and then sort of just followed the contour along the top. And then there's like a nub that sticks out on the corner, which you pretty much just have to lop that all off. And then I left this piece, which kind of sits down on another plastic piece. So this kind of just like spaces it up. But that gives you enough clearance so that you can get the cover down in there and then bolt it down. Again, it's just one Torx bit. So let me just try to show quickly here how easily this goes in after modifying it. up. So you get it lined up, you just gotta play with it for a second, and bam, yeah, we're there. So that's where it lives. I just gotta put that last Torx bit in, and then this job is done. And again, that's how it looks once you modify it. So basically it looks factory, but once the intake comes out, then there's gonna be a gaping hole there. If I end up selling the car, returning it to stock, I'll probably just pick one of those up. I'm sure it can't be more than $5–10 in a junkyard or something. Overall, you know, fitment is good, but not perfect. Mainly this. It's really the biggest gripe that I have, is that that plastic box can't be retained. One thing I also didn't note is for clearance, I took this brace off, so I had to put that back on, torque that down to 20 pound-feet, but that just gives you a little bit more clearance. Outside of that plastic box though, fitment, like, pretty good. I would say 9 out of 10. Oh yeah, one other tip too is this PCV. I had a little bit of trouble getting both the MAF and this PCV hose, or PCV hose in. I ended up taking some oil and oiling up the O-ring, and then had to put a good amount of pressure on it, and eventually it kind of slid down and clicked in there. So little tip for you guys, oil that O-ring, you shouldn't have any problems. But yeah, we'll start this thing up, and I'll do a little after clip, and that should be it for this one. And that is a wrap for this one. I had this thing out for a drive earlier today, and it sounds amazing. The intake is very loud, much louder than stock. I feel like factory intake, you could hear a little bit of turbo spool, but now, especially with the windows open, the turbo spool is very apparent. But dyno definitely says throttle response is better. Definitely feels like it has a little more power. It's a little bit punchier. So overall, very happy with the sound, very happy with the way it drives. No check engine light so far. That is it for this one. I hope this video could help you guys out for anyone trying to install this intake on their M2. And stay tuned. This is the first of many power mods to come. So see you guys in the next one, and thank you for watching.